My name is Rob Palmer here in Springfield, Missouri. This is another in the series of short podcasts on crashworthiness. Today, when we focus on crashworthiness, what we're talking about are injuries that are enhanced from what one would expect in an accident given the violence or the energy involved. That usually involves some kind of a defect in the vehicle that enhances or causes this severe catastrophic injury. Today, we're going to focus on weak and or collapsing roofs in all sorts of vehicles. Especially until the last couple of years, it's very common that roofs, especially on SUVs and pickup trucks and vans, are extremely weak and would collapse in any kind of rollover accident. It's estimated by National Highway Traffic Safety Administration that over 10,000 people are killed annually in rollover accidents. Now, it used to be an argument that collapsing roofs really did not cause injuries or deaths. At least that's what the auto manufacturers would say. But even though there are documents all the way back into the 1960s and 70s from the automotive manufacturers, which indicate they knew otherwise, that in fact collapsing or weak roofs do cause injuries and death. Well, as far as I'm concerned, this was solved in 2007 when NHTSA released the final study showing that vertical roof intrusion and post-crash headroom is a direct predictor of injury. In other words, the more roof crush, the more or lack of headroom, the greater the injury. And this is true no matter what type of model you want to use. The more there is roof crush, the more there's injury and death. Now let's talk about what that actually involves. There is a standard, FMVS 216, that was promulgated by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration that governs roof strength. Unfortunately, it's a very, very weak standard. In 1971, as you see on your screen on the left, my left, is the first standard. And basically that standard only said that under a Platen test, I'm going to show you what a Platen test is here in a moment, the vehicle only had to withstand 1.5% of its vehicle weight. So we would push on the corner of the roof, and if it could withstand 1.5% of its vehicle weight, it would pass the test. In 2009, they changed the standard so it has to be 3 times the vehicle weight, and you test it on 2 sides, not just one side as in the 1971 standard, but 2 sides. But this is not a dynamic test. It's basically a static test that doesn't test anything under real world conditions. And in fact, as we can see, and by the way, on the left there, you see a Platen that is pushing on the corner of the vehicle. And that's a Platen test. It's not a rollover or a drop test. And what we have is, it is a very, very slow test. As you can see in this video, it's just hardly moving at all. They also leave the windshield in for these tests, even though we know the windshield adds 30 to 40% to the strength of the roof. But it's in 70% of rollovers, the windshield fails. So it's not there to even provide strength to the roof. As you can see, this is a very slow, methodical test. Really, I'm kind of jumping ahead. You can see the Platen from a different angle. And then you can see how it's gradually crushing the roof. Very slow. It gradually crushes the roof. And then, you look here, another side. This is an example of the new standard, which doesn't test any real world accidents at all. Now, what kinds of roof crushes are you looking for when you're looking for a potential crashworthiness case? The first one we have in front of you here is a belt line crush. This is very common. You'll see it. The belt line is where you put your arm out the window. That's what it's resting on. It's called the belt line when you put your arm out the window. And you can see the roof in this case is completely crushed down to the belt line. Here's another example of a vehicle completely crushed down to the belt line. Obviously, these type of situations can result in severe and catastrophic injuries. Here's another type of roof crush we call matchboxing, when you see the roof go like this. And the Platen test doesn't even test things like this. And that's why there needs to be robust testing, such as drop testing and other types of testing to test for roof strength that will withstand matchboxing. Here's another phenomenon called tenting. This is usually a failure of the header. The pillars that hold the windshield up are called the A pillars. The bar that runs between the A pillars is called the header. In this case, in a lot of vehicles, and the two vehicles you see in front of you, they actually have an attachment between the two pieces in the A pillar, or in the header. And the header will just fail like this, and then allow the roof to crush, as we see in these two vehicles. This can also result in catastrophic and fatal injuries. Here is a classic example of an A pillar failure. You can see on where the circle is and the arrow is that the pillar has just completely failed. And if you were the passenger in this vehicle, you would more than likely receive severe injuries. Notice this also provides an opportunity, if you look in the upper photo, for your head, the passenger, to come out of the vehicle during the roll. This was what we call partial ejection, that they may have their seatbelt on. It still won't prevent partial ejection. If the roof collapses like this, the head will go straight out and be, of course, potentially fatal or catastrophic injury. Here's another A pillar failure. Obviously, if you were the driver in this case, you could be subjected to very extensive and serious injuries. Here's another A pillar failure. You can see this now on the driver's side, which crushes 5 or 6, 7, 8 inches, allowing for impact of the head. Here's another A pillar failure. Here is a pole failure, or tree failure. A lot of times when vehicles roll, they impact trees or telephone poles or other objects. When they do that, you see a crush pattern like this. And there's still ways that the automotive manufacturers can protect against these types of roof crushes. Here's one where you see that in this particular case, the occupants received severe and catastrophic injuries when they hit a very small tree, but it totally collapsed the roof on this Explorer Sport Track. Now, you would say, well, what kind of technology do they use to hold the roof up? Here is a 1981-82 ad for a Ford Falcon that was made in Australia. This ad shows you all the ways that you can increase the strength of the roof. What you see here is the vehicle safety cage, and they've used boron and high-strength steel to actually make the safety cage stronger, which they don't use in a lot of vehicles, even as today, though more and more vehicles recently are starting to use this. And then they also use structural foam in the A pillar, which provides tremendous strength for the safety cage for the occupants. This is technology that's been around forever, but here's a classic example from the early 80s. Now, here is some testing that I did on a vehicle, an Explorer Sport Track. And why this is important is you can actually, for $24, we increase the strength of the roof on this Explorer Sport Track. Notice right to left. On the left, you see the roof collapse. On the right, with the $24, it stays up, and the occupants would have easily survived with no injuries this accident. If you look here, here's another shot of it side by side. You'll see how literally it breaks the telephone pole. Same kind of telephone poles in both tests. There's no roof intrusion on the reinforced side, and there's dramatic intrusion on the manufactured vehicle without reinforcement. And you can see why the occupant of the Explorer Sport Track received catastrophic brain damage in this situation. One more time, just so you can see the dramatic difference that $24 can make. Now, here is a rollover test. And rollover tests aren't perfect to test roofs because they're not repeatable. But this is an XC90 Volvo. And you can see in this dramatic rollover, the roof stays totally intact. In fact, the people you hear cheering are Ford employees. This is back when Ford owned Volvo, and they were so proud of the way the roof stayed up. Let me show you that again. Look at how the roof stays up with just using boron and high-strength steel. Look at all the times it hits on the roof, and the roof stays totally intact, protecting the occupant. Now, what do you look for? Besides the dramatic roof crush I showed you in the prior slides, look for things like spinal cord injuries, and that can include quadriplegia, paraplegia, things of that nature. Also look for traumatic brain injury, which is very common in rollovers. And this traumatic brain injury, you might also see with partial ejection, when the arm and the head come out of the vehicles that rolls over, as I told you in that matchboxing, which actually opens up a portal of exit for the head, even when the seatbelt is being worn. Also look for asphyxiation. Lots of times the roof will crush and the head will be jammed down onto the chest. So the occupant, even though they've not suffered a spinal cord injury or brain damage, they can't breathe and they will literally suffocate. And lastly, look for death. Very, very common in roof crush type situations. When you have these kind of catastrophic injuries, you probably have a good roof crush case. Now, what do you do if you get what you think might be a good roof crush case? First, preserve the vehicle. It's the most important piece of evidence in the case. Do not move the seats or the seat belts. Next, don't accept any early offers with some other vehicle or other occupants or drivers or whatever is involved, because you may be forced by doing so to be in federal court, which is not as good a place to be as in most state courts. So don't just take an early cheap settlement. Take numerous photographs of the vehicle, all sides, and in particular of the roof, seatbelt, and where the injured occupant was seated at the time of the accident. Eric Jensen and myself would be glad to review any type of case that you might think would be a crashworthiness case. And above all, do this as quickly as possible. These cases don't get better with age. And of course, do this before the statute runs. I want to thank you very much for taking the opportunity to watch this short video. If you do think that you have a potential crashworthiness case, especially a roof crash case, don't hesitate to contact myself or to Eric Jensen, as we'd be glad to review the case for you. Thank you.